Welcome to the South Lyon Area Amateur Radio Club, where passion for radio communication meets community. Connect, explore, join.
With that, I think we're ready to turn over for tonight's presenter. Tonight is Rory W8KNX, and take it away.
So Eric asked me to put a little something together about the incident command system, better known as the ICS. If anyone has done anything with emergency communications, this will be common knowledge to you, but this will also be new for a lot of our new folks that we have on board. I think Eric has some plans for some training and some fun things coming up. So we wanted to start here so that some of the basics are covered on ICS before we do some other things. So again, this is a very high level overview of the incident command system, and anyone who's already done anything related to RACES or ARES or Oxcom or any of those, this will be very familiar to you. So
Is this part of CERT?
CERT's included in part of this as well. CERT can be included.
I saw a number of emails, CERT being, but they don't tell what it is. I had to go online and use Google to find out what CERT stood for. Right.
So this is a long, wordy slide. I don't have a lot of slides with a lot of words on them. This is one of the only ones. So the incident command system is a standardized, customizable, and adaptive approach to incident management. So that's essentially what it is. It's a system that was put into place to allow for flexibility, moldability, adaptability, depending on what type of incident might be occurring. And that can be an incident that's of an emergency nature, or an incident that's a community service event like a parade or something of that nature. So this is big picture, it's just to allow for all different entities such as police, fire, DPW, ham radio operators, Red Cross, to all be able to come to an incident and be able to work in a unified nature together. The ICS system started back in the 1970s out in California. They found that after a series of wildfires in the Southern California area, they had the problem with Los Angeles County Sheriff, Los Angeles County Fire, Los Angeles City Fire, all these people showing up to do stuff, and no one was actually in control of the overall command of the incident. So they developed the incident command system, and various parts of this were already in place, but they're the ones who kind of took the helm and started formalizing how it actually works today.
Or how it's supposed to work.
How it's supposed to work today. So they took a look at what they needed to do, what they wanted to do, what their objectives were. So they wanted to be able to meet the needs of incidents of any kind or size. So that can be something like we saw in the last year with the wildfires out west, hurricanes in North Carolina, or your simple Pumpkin Fest event here in South Lyon. Also can be used for planned events, including conferences where they might have hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of people converging on a city, and they need to be prepared for managing all that and all the things that come along with it. Think about potentially the Olympics coming into Los Angeles. They're going to have to do the same thing. They'll have to coordinate and plan and put their whole command together so everything is running through a single unified command. Also to provide logistical and administrative support. So this is where ham radio, and we'll talk about this, ham radio and volunteer people come into play a lot of times within ICS. A lot of times an event is a long-term event. You might have a fire that lasts a week, but you might have 6 months of cleanup or other residual things that might occur. The people that were the first on the scene, they're going to be very tired after that first week. There's still going to need to be people showing up to help fix the radios, help provide food at food locations, any of those things. That's going to need to be provided over a lengthy period of time. So this is where they often bring in the volunteers, whether they're amateur radio operators operating through RACES or Oxcom entities, or community emergency response team, which is CERT that Mike mentioned. That's where they start bringing in these volunteer organizations to help provide additional support. And again, big picture, let it be cost effective. You don't want to have duplication of efforts and have two entities, two agencies that could potentially cost a lot of money doing the same thing. Have it all planned and coordinated through a single point.
Question?
Sure.
So an event that
not necessarily people are making money in it, but like you said, like a political rally. Does the underwriter of that rally the group with anything financial?
So a lot of times, regardless of what the event is, whether it's a political thing or an Olympic event or a public parade, the local municipality, whoever they're putting in command of the overall ICS, which is usually depending on the size of it, maybe your local police, maybe your local fire, they'll bring that person in as part of the incident command system. That person that's a representative of the rally or whatever, they would have them on their staff, so to speak, to interface during the incident. So they're on the same page through the whole thing.
If there's costs for it,
Well, that's up to the cost is, taxes, and that's up to how the taxes are handled and whether fees are assessed back to someone. I think that's an it depends thing based on what the event is. So where do we fall in? You have this big structure of incident command, which all these things, and you might not even have all these boxes on an incident. It might be a small thing where you're not going to have an air operations section. You're not going to have anyone doing food service, but and that's what makes it adaptable and moldable. But where does amateur radio fall in? You have this little circle here with the communications unit, and that's where all the entities that are providing communications fall into place under ICS. So we're under the logistics section and within the communications unit. Who all is in this communications unit? A lot of things are there. It's a big umbrella. You have people putting radios in place, fixing public service radios, running messages, doing all these things. But you also have on the right, this box over here, where the technical specialists that they call them now, which noted there is Oxcom, which is where under ICS amateur radio falls in under these days. Previously, everyone would have remembered Races and Aries was kind of the top of the spectrum, but in Michigan, nowadays it's all under the umbrella of Oxcom. And all the entities, whether you're Aries or Races or React, which is, I don't even know, it was a CB organization back in the day. All these things all fall under Oxcom these days, as far as their communications are concerned. You see Red Cross is up there. Their function is different, but they also do provide radio support that would fall under the communication side. CERT is up there. They provide all sorts of things. They can do point of distribution. They can do door-to-door checking on people, but again, they have a communications section, so the communications part falls under the Oxcom umbrella nowadays. So what type of incidents would use amateur radio? And we can probably look at the list of things here. The top one on the list, electrical power failure, who was around in 2003, August. We had a large power failure in a wide area, but it affected Metro Detroit. At that time, I was very involved with Oakland County Races at the time, and we had to stand up a net covering all the county hospitals in very short response time. What had happened is the county's radio system that served the hospitals, for the hospitals to be able to get back to the county with their needs, failed. So we stood up ham radio operators at, I believe, 13 hospitals in Oakland County to provide message handling between the county EOC and each of those hospitals. We worked, I think, 3 days straight, being the primary method of communication between the county EOC and the hospitals, because each hospital was a little different. Some of them had phones that worked, some of them didn't. Some of them had generators that worked, some of them didn't. One hospital had a generator that exploded and had no backup power. It was a big commotion, and that one's on the top of the list because I was very involved in that. Hurricane response, I think we all have seen, and I could have put a link in here and brought up a video, but there's several news stories on the hurricane damage through the Carolinas, and in a lot of those little pockets of rural areas, amateur radio for a period of time was the only way for people to get messages in and out about health and welfare of family members. Same thing with wildfire response, and they were used in the recent California wildfires. In the Malibu area, Topanga Canyon there has a very strong amateur radio presence, and they're ready to be able to provide communication for their residents when they need to. And again, it's also there to handle low priority events, whether they're parades or community events or points of distribution. And I put one on the bottom there, road traffic monitoring. That's what I've not seen it done in Michigan, but a friend of mine down in Indiana, that's a big one for them. For example, the eclipse that came through last year, they stationed, of course, there's electronic things that tell people how the traffic is, but the state was so worried in Indiana that would be overloaded and the roads would be overloaded. They asked amateur radio operators to go out and watch the traffic while they watch the eclipse, essentially. So how do we fit into all of this? Well, the club, and Eric will talk about this some more, I'm sure, but we want to make sure we're prepared to help ourselves and our families during an incident or an emergency. Always make sure our backup stuff, whether it's batteries or extra radios or generators, make sure they're always ready. Secondarily, let us be able to help our community during an incident or emergency with having available training. So how can you learn more? Familiarize yourself with ICS forms. There's a whole website of ICS forms, and you can Google that. FEMA has a whole category of it. I think I outlined 3 here to talk about today as ones that I feel important. ICS form 201. So this, during an incident, this would always be your big picture, and it's small up there. The first one is a big overview of the event. The second page, what their objectives are for the current and next period. The third one's very important. And these forms, if you overflow on a page, you would add another page. If you have a large event, it would be as big, long, complicated as you need it to be. But that page 3 is important because that's telling everyone in the incident who is in which position, so that you know who's the incident commander, who's the communications unit leader, who's handling, and all the way down to the ham radio person should be listed. ICS 205, this one is incredibly important, and this one I found online because I didn't have one handy, but this was one that an Aries group out east provided on their website as, I believe, just a standard ICS 205. And if you look at it, it gives you everything you need to know about frequencies, PL tones, mode of transportation, mode of transmission of the signal, and any remarks. So this is your phone book, so to speak, of what channels and what frequencies you would be expected to operate on or be able to operate on during an event. And these are designed to have everything you need in one place. The receive frequency for a repeater there, the transmit frequency is there, PL tone, what mode, and it's all very detailed because in a time of emergency, there is no room for error. You want to make sure that you have your radio offset set the right way and have the PL tone set the right way. And if it's a fusion repeater, have it set that. If it's not, don't have it set that way, so on and so forth. So I thought this was a good example because this particular one is ham radio based. But at a large enough event, this would just be one page of maybe 10 of a communication plan that's in place. You would have pages of all the channels, the frequency, the channels and frequency the police might be using, the fire might be using, their interoperability channels so they can talk to each other on channels that are legal for them to do that on, and so forth. So this is a very important one, the 205.
Is it one central command that listens to all of those, or
So if you think back, if you think back to the chain of command that we showed on the earlier screen, on a large enough event, you would have channels set up for, it would work just like that chain of command. You would have a set of channels set up for your logistics section. They would report there, and they would have the ability to report up to their next chain of command person, all the way up to the command. Because in a large enough event, there's not some guy sitting in a tent running the show, listening to 20 frequencies. That's no good.
well, I think of the Trump shooting.
Pardon?
Yeah, I think of the Trump shooting.
Okay, yeah.
That place that didn't even have radios in the Secret Service one.
Right, so that's something they should have planned in advance using the same system that the communication should have been coordinated in advance with the Secret Service to the local sheriff, police. All the entities should have had a plan in place. What we do in the state of Michigan is the state emergency operations center in Lansing will do what they call a partial activation of the EOC, where they're there, they've talked to all the entities. If the president's in the state, the EOC is partially activated in Michigan. That's how it works. Someone there would know how to make all the pieces work together. And that's what should be done with the incident command system, whether it's a presidential visit or, like I said, a small local event. 213, this is where we kind of get into the amateur radio stuff. This is what the ICS, the Incident Command System, uses for general messages. Again, it's very simple. It's who it's to, who it's from, what it's about, the message, and if there's a response, it would go at the bottom. And you might have this at your radio station when you're talking back and forth to folks. If the radios are all down, you might take a message, write it on here, give someone a copy, and they're going to get on in their car and go hand deliver a message. It can be used in any of those formats.
Where these all paper forms, they got electronic forms.
These are available. You can order them. They'll send them to you, but they are PDFs as well.
This is a standard form that's used in WinLink check-in stuff.
So so when I was preparing this, there was a whole section on WinLink that I that might be fun for another time, because I'm getting my feet wet in WinLink for the first time ever, and I've gone through some of those. A lot of these forms and some of their format are available, and you can send them through WinLink. So that's something we can maybe put on the calendar for the future of how that is. I think that would be cool.
Briefly, what's been.
WinLink is essentially, how basic do you want me to describe it? Packet radio email. That's basically WinLink. Sure.
Okay.
So Eric says to me, do you want to mention this form? And we would just get to the next slide. So a lot of people who have been hams for a while remember the National Traffic System and the radiogram forms. They are still used. There's a guy handing them out at the Livonia swap. Is that where that came from? They had a whole box of them. That
No, I don't know where this one
Oh,
came
okay.
from.
Okay, so the National Traffic System as it's existed on amateur radio is still in place. I'm sure a lot of people have heard the 1015 evening net on the Spirit of 76 repeater. And it's kind of the same thing. It's a, for anyone who's not familiar with National Traffic System, it's a manual method of getting messages point to point from any ham radio operator, or for a private person if you need to, from one point to another. And it's a similar structure. You have your local net, you have your state net, and then you have your wide area net, and messages get passed using this format in there. It's very interesting. I used to do, when I was initially licensed and active back in the early 2000s, did a lot of radio traffic handling, and it can be fun. It's kind of redundant nowadays. It's a really backup method of communications. You hear a lot of happy birthdays and congratulations on your upgrade, and make sure that you've renewed your license messages type of things get passed. That's but it's keeping, people say, why do we still send these canned messages? But it's keeping that system in place and everyone's skills sharp for when we might need it. And go back to the blackout of 2003. I would have never thought I was actually using this format to send legit health and welfare messages to and from hospitals within Oakland County. Also, any of the folks involved with the hurricane stuff down in North Carolina, same thing. They were sending legitimate health and welfare messages, trying to get resources for people, and messages to family members who couldn't get through by normal means.
I'm gonna ask a question. Phil.
Sure.
How many of the new hams got a phone call after you got your ticket from someone with yours might be coming in a few days.
Yeah.
I know I got one. Guy had a radiogram for me from someone across the country. There's various clubs that's all they do is watch for new ticket upgrades, and will put a radiogram out to get you the message to congratulate you.
Last year I got a radiogram from a guy in Lansing monitoring a pony activation, telling me about some.
It seems so old fashioned, and a lot of people will argue that these types of things are unnecessary, but they're unnecessary until you need them. And then suddenly that the people wish they had kept their skills sharp and so forth. And I'm glad that they continue. And really the North Carolina and Tennessee flooding and hurricane response was the most recent big deal use of these.
At early 2000 power outage, I was stuck in a parking lot running out of gas. And I had to pay a lawn service guy who was trying to buy $20, 2 gallons of gas. So I could get home.
There were all sorts of interesting wheeling and dealing going on with generators and fuel during that time. So again, where can you learn more? Get familiar with the ICS forums online. Just do a Google ICS forums, FEMA will come up. If you're actually very interested, get involved in the Oxcom or RACES group. Each county in the Metro Detroit area has a fairly well-established group in place. So that's always there. And I probably could help you get in touch with someone if you needed to. The IS 100 is the self-study IS meaning independent study course of the ICS 100. And that's one thing people get screwed up on is the two similar names. IS is the independent study course for the ICS 100, which can be done as an in-person class. But it does give a lot of information on incident command, when it's used, how the little things that you might wonder about what would happen in this situation or that situation would come about. And on that same website, there's a ton of other FEMA training available, and it's all self-guided in most cases. There's a lot of in-person training available, but there's a lot of self-guided training available as well. Just a couple of reminders, and if something's happened, don't self-deploy yourself into an incident. You might say, "Oh, I've got these radios, I can help." Make sure you're listening, listen to the net, get in touch with someone, let them call you. If they don't know that you're coming to help and it's a bad situation, you're probably just going to get in the way and cause a bigger problem for a problem that's already there. So again, don't show up without being invited or instructed to show up. And if you are going to show up, make sure your stuff is charged, serviceable, and ready to go. We don't want to show up somewhere with something that the wires are falling off and the battery might last 20 minutes if you put it on low power. They don't want any of that. Make sure your stuff is ready to go if you are wanting to do that and be involved. So, like I said, this was a high-level overview of incident command system. Anyone have? I'm not an expert. I just have high-level knowledge just from doing things over the years and other organizations I'm part of as well. So, someone in the back, Steve.
Yeah, so one of the coolest, Pikes Peak, Colorado Springs, amateur club, they support the Pikes Peak Marathon. And what that is they deploy all along the bar trail from like 70, 200 feet, all the way to the top of Pikes Peak. And you're out there pretty much all day. And not only that, you can get caught in a blizzard on Pikes Peak all the way through probably July.
Yeah.
So you have to have your equipment to where you can protect it from rain. There's huge lightning risks.
Oh yeah.
But they do it every year, and I think their function is to report bib numbers and then injuries. But it's pretty cool, and they do it every year. And they also support the race to the clouds, the motor race.
Yeah.
On Pikes Peak.
And the point you make of it, the conditions they can be, that's another reason we don't want to self-deploy or not, because they want to, if you're going out and putting yourself in an incident, you don't want to be going out without your snow stuff if it's going to be like that or any of that. You need to be prepared. For sure.
So Rory, we see any need for information security because we're listening to what the communication all the time say hospital now I need 1,000 pills of so and so. You get robbed because people know they're coming. Are there any kind of security methods to make sure this doesn't get in the wrong hands?
So of course, certain things you would attempt to use some sort of secure method, whether it's radio communications that are encrypted through public safety things instead of hammer yoke. But there's instances where the emergency's been bad enough, you just got to send it. I mean that I talk about the hospital net we had to stand up in the early 2000s. We didn't have anything medical or individualized. We were able to keep that off the air, but we were passing messages about hospitals needing large amounts of water or fuel or in one case, more staff because, you know, the staff had worked there 30 hours and they were falling over themselves, you know, so that was our job to pass between the hospitals and then county medical control. So in general, you don't want to send sensitive stuff. You want to use the most secure, but if it's bad enough, like I said, you almost just have to send it sometimes.
Speaking from experience,
Sure.
be careful what you say around Secret Service. It's when I never got myself killed.
I would say that's a fair warning for sure.
What was the wrong thing that you
Oh,
said?
geez.
I'm a tire. And I specialized in political and nonprofit benefit agriculture. And I was at an event, Condoleezza Rice was the speaker. So I get there like 6 hours before to meet the Secret Service and the state police and the US Marshal. And they said, okay, we're gonna do the photographs there. So I set my camera up. I had the dogs come over and sniff everything. And then her dance team came in and said, I speak close to the door. We're gonna move it there. Moved everything, dogs sniffed the cameras. Then the team came in and said, screw that, we're moving over here. So now I'm in the area where there's an hors d'oeuvres section. And someone came up and said, gee, Fred, I didn't know you were gonna be here. I said, yeah, I'm here to shoot kind of the rice.
Oh, boy.
Now, like 50 guys are reaching under their coats and down their ankles and.
Sure.
It's not for.
Choice of phraseology is important. Eric has another resource and
You missed.
Field resources manual. This is older. There's several things that if I flip through here, I can guess what's in here. Forums and tips and tricks and maps. And there's several of these that you'll see at ham swaps and so forth, Dayton, in online bookstores, and that there's several resources like this that are super handy.
What bands is it? Yeah, right now.
Depends what you're doing. So if it's a localized event, you'll be on 2 meters or 440. But if you're trying to cover a wide area, if you look at their plan here, they've got everything from their 2 meter frequencies to 80 and 40 meter HF to cover statewide, in this case, Virginia.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, but just as yeah, but you know, it's whatever frequency is needed to cover the area.